every client that comes on to Selling from the Heart, I have that magical come to the man upstairs moment. And it goes something like this. In order for our relationship to flourish, I just need to get something out in the open. We got to be clear with our communication. We're going to be transparent. And being transparent means sometimes you're going to say something I'm not going to like. Sometimes I'm going to say something you're not going to like. But in order for this relationship to move to a trusted, mutually agreeable, beneficial relationship, we got to bring clarity and transparency to the forefront. We got to be open in our communication, and we got to set aside feelings. Are we okay with that?
Welcome to the How to Not Execute Your Strategy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Ohai. These are the lessons that make you the leader you want to be. Go to timohai.com to learn more. My guest today is Larry Levine. Larry is a huge name in the world of sales, but he has recently expanded his energy to share the best leadership practices of CEOs through his Culture from the Heart podcast. As one of the top sales podcasters in the world, he has access to CEOs and other executives in a way that few do. And in this conversation, Larry shares the essential secrets to success that he has learned from these interactions. See the show notes for more information about Larry and to also get access to the leader guide for this episode. Let's get to it. Larry, of all the guests I've had on this show, you're probably the one I'm most giddy about just because we're such good friends. And I will say that Larry is one of the people who means a lot to me personally and professionally. Larry, it's great to have you. Welcome.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this, Tim. And just so you all know, Tim's near and dear friend of mine, but Tim's been on the Selling from the Heart podcast 3 times.
Yeah,
You're a 3-time offender, Ohai.
I'm definitely on the guilty column, a little bit, maybe even Santa's bad list, the naughty list. With that said, Larry, we're going to dive right in. And as we start all these episodes with this discussion around, tell me about a time when you had a strategy that you had to implement that didn't go as planned.
Oh, it's a great question. And I'm going to take you and all of our listeners, all your wonderful listeners, back in time, if you allow me to.
Yeah, please.
So I spent my whole entire career in the office technology space. So I live in Southern California, just north of Los Angeles, in a city called Thousand Oaks. And I had 3 copier dealerships. I was business partners in copier dealerships. And I learned a long time ago that if you wanted to stand out, you had to do something different. You had to work with your clients different. And I knew one of the things that would create differentiation was what would happen after the sale. And I learned something early on from a past client. And I'm going to give a shout out. This person's not there anymore, Tim. His name is Billy Burnett. Now he's a retired chief financial officer from an organization called Johnny and Friends, which means a tremendous amount to me. Started by Johnny Erickson Tata. She's a quadriplegic now, but she dove off of a dock when she was 12 years old, hit her neck, busted it. She's been sitting ever since, but she does the most wonderful paintings with a paintbrush in her mouth. She has wheelchairs for the world as well. But when I started selling them their copiers, this goes way back. This is decades ago, Tim.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I keyed in on was that Billy, once I installed all these, he walked me around. This is a chief financial officer, Tim. He walked me around and he introduced me to every single employee.
How many people are we talking about? Like 10?
It took him 2 hours. It took him 2 hours.
I was going to say, this is way more than 10.
Way more than 10
hours.
Took him 2 hours out of his time to do this. I got back into my car, Tim, and I go, holy cow, what just happened?
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that before. And this is what I said. If I go back 1 week later, how many people would really remember me? I went back a week later and I walked the halls. Everybody remembered me.
Wow.
The point behind all this, I go, what would it be like if I implemented that strategy in my copier dealership? What would it be like if I walked the halls of my clients' offices Now, I took it one step farther. I cleaned copiers and all that. That's a topic for a whole nother conversation. But that's just the inspirational experience I wanted to bring. But every 30 days, I walked the halls, my clients' offices. I got to know people in different ways. I met new people, right? I got to visualize what was going on in their company, something that I couldn't do if I didn't see these people much more than every, quarter at best.
Totally.
So fast forward, I wound up exiting out of my copier dealerships, and I went to go work for a Japanese OEM. I was on their corporate major account team, and I went to implement the same philosophy. And all that happened was, nope, you're not doing that here.
Why?
It takes up too much time.
So
that's what technology's for, right? Because now we're talking about how copiers are connected to networks. We can do all of this stuff that you are doing face to face. We can let technology do it, which will free you up to do other things. I said, no, but you don't understand. This is the genuine, meaningful relationships that you build. And by the way, how can you ask people to come back for more if you hardly ever see these people?
It reminds me of, and I know that they're not as shiny as they once were, but in the days when they were growing dramatically, Starbucks had a phrase that was well known to us in the business world. And that was that, Starbucks is not in the coffee business serving people. They're in the people business serving coffee.
Yeah.
And when they were living that, they thrived. I would genuinely say that applies to every organization. You're in the people business serving XYZ, serving healthcare, serving technology, serving financial services, whatever it is that you're doing. And why do you think leaders don't seem to understand this? And more importantly, don't want to empower that in their organizations?
Yeah, wow. I think it goes back to, and I'm going to preface it because I came out of a highly commoditized channel. And so the first word that comes to mind, Tim, is transaction. When leaders have this transactional mindset, and I say this because that was the decades I spent in the Office Technology channel, highly transactional, highly laggard. I go, if I want people to come back for more, and those people are my clients, I got to do something different. Not my company, not leadership. I got to take responsibility for it. And I think if more leaders took responsibility for how their people show up, not only show up to work, but how they show up for their clients, watch what would happen. But when leaders, I'm going to make a bold statement on this, but when leaders treat their employees as a transaction, what do you think their employees treat their customers as? And you'll notice I used customers, not clients. Because customers, right? Customers buy things, clients seek advice. So when leaders treat their employees as a transaction, it cascades out through their whole company. Then it cascades out of their company. And what do you think their people go to market to? They treat clients as customers. Big difference.
Well, the go-to-market exercises I've been a part of, and frankly, they're frustrating because I sit there and I listen to the same old, and it's all math. There's no relationship. There's no sense of anything beyond this segment is worth X amount of money. That segment is worth Y amount of money. Therefore, let's change the level of service based on the cost benefit analysis. And I'm like, that the best companies or the best situations I've been in where we're having different conversations is around this relationship has produced this innovation for us and this mutual value for us. I think of, I'm going way back, but gosh, when I worked at Pennzoil and the relationship it had with Walmart in the automotive section, because Walmart would say, look, bring ideas to us, help us figure this stuff out, because we're not automotive experts. We're box experts. We're logistics people. We move things around and keep that moving. And the relationship was very mutually beneficial because it was a relationship. And the strategy that then was born from that relationship turned into something way more powerful than a strategy born out of a financial analysis and a cost benefit discussion between executives and finance. When you look at the companies you work with now, because what you're working on now, and shout out to your brand new podcast, A Culture from the Heart, where you're talking to CEOs who are trying to lead differently. What is separating the CEOs you're trying to bring on as guests and the message you're trying to promote from what I'll call the empty suits, the other CEOs out there who frankly don't understand what we're talking about at all?
Well, gosh, a lot of things. We could probably go 2 hours just on that question. But it's interesting what they're bringing to the forefront. And what we're finding out is these CEOs live on purpose. They're intentional. And here's the last thing, and I'm seeing it straight across the board. They love on their people. We just recently, right, and this Culture from the Heart podcast is brand spanking new. It's the evolution of selling from the heart. Right. I'm so happy. I'm just so thrilled to see this. But we've interviewed some really interesting and heartfelt CEOs, and the love on your people has come out in every conversation. They're intentional. They're on purpose. They love on their people, and they cascade that out through the whole company. And they do this. They never, ever waver their integrity.
What does love on their people look like?
Oh, it's just a great expression, but loving on their people. And I've seen this because the CEOs that have been on the podcast, I personally know. Right. So I know they walk the walk, they talk the talk. They're highly congruent. They're building relationships or getting to know their people outside of employees. What makes them tick? Their spouses, significant others. What are their hobbies? What do they like? What do they don't like? Where do they go on vacations? What's their favorite book they like reading? What's their favorite movie? They pour into their people. They know more about some of their people than maybe some of their friends know about who they are. And I'm bringing this up because I'm a massive believer in this. And this is a question I've asked all the time at Selling from the Heart. And I've asked this to CEOs. And it's people and relationship skills. These are the things that I see that are sorely lacking. However, very strategic and very forward thinking, heartfelt CEOs understand the people side of this and the relationship building side of this. And they mirror that. The same way that they build relationships with their people, they're coaching their people to build relationships the same way with their clients.
So
you get what I'm saying?
I totally do. So I want to separate between people who are nice versus people who will make sacrifices for their people, because there's a lot of nice CEOs out there who are friendly and polite and will shake your hand and ask how things are doing and whatnot. But now we're getting into the tension that comes to every leader when you are trying to get something done and you have to press on your people a bit. You have to lean on them and you have to put pressure on them. How do they balance that pressure so that they're not crushing their teams? Because let's be blunt, the data has been horrible in 2024. People are being crushed by their leaders. And as I talked with another friend of mine, and he's been doing business since the 80s and the 90s, he's like, flat out, I've never seen it this bad. I've never seen the gap between senior executives and their people be so big. And the leaders are almost don't care about how hard it is on their teams. What you're talking about is more than just, oh, I care. I'll wring my hands as I write the email to tell everybody we're going to reduce the workforce by 20% and we're going to be cutting all this other stuff. How do you find that balance? Because it is not easy to be people-centric and profitable, or is it?
It's a great question. I'm sitting here listening to what you're saying, and it goes back to this old saying. It's ringing in my ear right now. And I remember this from an old workshop I did. The guy who delivered this workshop, if he's still alive, I'm guessing he'd probably be pushing well into his 80s. And he always used to say this. He goes, as a leader, you got to be able to deliver a message with an iron fist and a velvet glove. And the only way you can do this is you got to be that people person. I'm going to expand upon this. And it came out in a book I was reading, one of my favorite books I've read. And Tim, I love reading books.
Yeah.
And I read this book a couple years ago, and it just mirrors a lot of things that you're just saying. It was called The Business of Honor. And I believe it was by, I'm going to butcher his last name, but it's Bob Hassan, if that's how he pronounces it, Hasson, and Danny Silk.
Okay.
And in that book, it's a very faith-based book, but it ties business and faith together very well. And they said where people struggle, and I'll even say as leaders or executives struggle, is they struggle to have healthy, assertive business conversations. And what you're describing is a healthy, assertive business conversation. You may hurt somebody's feelings, but you got to be able to deliver a very stern message with a very loving hand, because you got to respect how people are going to feel. You can't just be that hard. You know what? You got to be compassionate. You got to be able to care, especially in the world today. But you got to be able to deliver that stern message with confidence, with conviction, with clarity. And you got to deliver it in a very loving, tender way that still gets the point across without driving the hammer and the sledgehammer down. And that's what I believe a lot of people need to work on. That's the opportunity that's out there for CEOs if they can latch onto that mentally. And the message isn't for everyone.
If you were like most leaders, you learned how to execute strategy through trial and error, and your teammates learned the same way, if they've even learned it at all. The result is that how we execute our strategies generates massive waste and fatigue, but it doesn't have to be this way. If you'd like to master how strategies execute, go to timohai.com/masterclass now. You'll find everything I use to help my clients thrive all in one power-packed place. Don't you think it's time to invest in yourself? All right, back to the interview. There's two things that immediately come to mind. It's the old phrase of truth and love, right? Truth without love breeds arrogance, and love without truth breeds deception. I'm paraphrasing an old phrase. But the bottom line here is that you're talking about leaders who understand how to communicate both at the same time. But then the other thing you bring in, and this is where I want to go deep right now, is the word clarity. Because without that clarity, without truly seeing and knowing what's really going on, I don't know when to lean in and provide truth with love. I don't know how. It just becomes what I call, random acts of kindness. I'll just be nice when I'm nice. And then all of a sudden there's a fire. And then I walk in and I'm just spraying water everywhere and I don't care who gets hit. That clarity piece, I know you're passionate about. Take us down a little bit of the path around how you see clarity becoming almost the activator for being able to be this kind of a leader.
Oh, it's clarity's near and dear to me. It's deeply woven. It's deeply woven into my why. I'm a high clarity guy. If things are not clear, I push the brakes. And Tim, you and I have had so many conversations where clarity's come out, where we don't even know clarity's coming out, because that's just how we operate. Just think about it this way. If leaders aren't clear, if leaders aren't crystal clear, and then I'll throw in, if they can't deliver a message or communicate with clarity, conviction, and they can't be concise with it, just bring some humor into this just for a moment, just to lighten the load. They're always going to walk around with a bottle of Windex, right? They're always going to have to clean up the conversation because they're not clear, right? It's like trying to look through a spotted window. It's going to be hard until you get that bottle of Windex out and a rag and you clean off. Now you got a crystal clear window you can see out of. The same thing applies to how you communicate with people. If you're not clear, if you're wishy-washy, to use that term, if you waver back and forth, you go from being hard-nosed to soft-nosed, you go from being nice to mean, you go from being loving and caring to being a jerk.
Yeah. Now
you're not being clear. You're wavering. You're walking on both sides of the fence. And then you get people going, what's going on? So just as in society as a whole, just as trust and credibility is really low and skepticism's at all-time high and BS factors are at an all-time high, the same can be applied internally. And if you can bring clarity to the forefront and how you cascade your message out. And then you follow up on that clarity, and then you follow up on that clarity, and you get clear understanding, you get mutual agreement on things. Walk me through this. What parts of maybe what I just shared are we not clear upon? What questions? It's okay if you have questions. That's how we gain clarity on this so we can move forward. I'll give you a perfect example if you allow me.
Yeah, please do.
Is every client that comes on to Selling from the Heart, I have that magical come to the man upstairs moment. And it goes something like this. In order for our relationship to flourish, I just need to get something out in the open. We got to be clear with our communication. We're going to be transparent. And being transparent means sometimes you're going to say something I'm not going to like. Sometimes I'm going to say something you're not going to like. But in order for this relationship to move to a trusted, mutually agreeable, beneficial relationship, we got to bring clarity and transparency to the forefront. We got to be open in our communication, and we got to set aside feelings. Are we okay with that? 100% of the time they said, I am so glad you said that. Because now when I have to have the tough conversations, it was all mutually agreed upon up front. Same thing could be applied in leadership. If CEOs could just cascade that message to mid-level managers, and CEOs work with their mid-level managers that way, and mid-level managers can cascade it down to lower-level managers, and there's a level of accountability right there. And that willingness to be open and not worrying about, gosh, what am I going to say? But go, I remember that conversation I had with Tim 2 months ago. He told me we can have open-minded, open heart, transparent conversations that are crystal clear.
But Larry, that's going to generate conflict.
But you know what? So now I'm sharing this, but conflict is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this in my heart. If you can overcome conflict in a healthy way, here's the word that rises to the surface: trust.
Yeah. Yeah. People want trust to happen, and I just trust can't happen if there isn't conflict. If you don't bring what's hiding in the shadows out into the sunlight and just deal with it, you've got to wrestle it to the ground so that everybody's like, okay, this thing is not running around biting anyone anymore. And if you don't do the work to figure that out, I had a CEO when I was first working at Shell years ago who used the word robust. And he was Scottish, but he had great way of saying a robust but respectful dialogue. We maintain the respect, but at the same time, we have to be robust. We have to be able to raise our voice a little bit. We have to be able to show the passion about the idea so we can hash it out and wrestle it to the ground so that we can have clarity, so that we can make great decisions. Because if I take clarity away, all decision making goes straight into the ditch without clarity.
100%. And here's the first word. This is a word I like using, Tim. It's called healthy.
Great word.
I go, it's okay to have healthy conversations. And inside healthy conversations, we may or may not agree. That's okay. But all of what we're talking about requires everybody to do one thing. You got to practice. You got to practice having these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't run away from these. You cannot run away from these conversations. You got to run into the storm on these conversations. That's how you're going to build up the ability to have these type of conversations, which I think are necessary conversations.
100% agree.
And here's why. If you can do this internally, you can do this externally. Because if you can't have assertive, healthy, transparent, clarity-based conversations internally, do you think your people are having them externally with your customers?
Man. No way.
No way.
No way.
No way.
If you don't practice, you can't preach.
No, 100%.
Most people would be shocked. And I've had some experience with professional sports just as an outsider. And people would be shocked at what actually happens inside the locker room amongst high-performing teams.
Oh, yeah.
there's fights, there's arguments, there's chippiness, there's disagreements, there's stuff. And they work it out in the locker room so that when they show up on the gymnastics arena or on the football pitch or whatever, it doesn't affect how they play. They figure it out because, to your point, they trust each other.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. We've covered a lot of ground so far. We've talked about this idea of really genuinely understanding your clients and having a relationship that's way more than transactional, priming the pump of your execution by simply having love in your organization, especially as the leader, knowing you're loving on your people, knowing them so well. But then there's also this robust clarity, this true level of trust-based accountability that you could have tough conversations as absolutely critical to building a team that can execute any strategy. Are there any mistakes that you would call out, that you would want to highlight and say, look, I have seen this just ruin great execution?
One word I'm going to bring to the surface because I see it all the time. I'm just going to call it out. It's inauthenticity and it's fake.
Tell me more.
People can sense this. And I can't scientifically prove this, Tim, because I don't have any doctoral credentials behind me. It's just life experiences and looking at this through the lens of a practitioner, which sometimes maybe carries a little bit more clout. But people can sense insincerity. People can sense fake. The world today, I think more people don't trust people than trust people. They walk into every conversation with skepticism. They're going, is that the real Tim Ohai? Or is that the fake Tim Ohai? Come on, right? That's where I want to go with this is you can't just do it to do it. If that makes any sense. You got to, in your heart, believe in all of this, because if you say it, people are paying attention to your body language. They're paying attention to your eye movement. If they're seeing you, they're paying attention to your messaging. If it's a cascaded message out, they're really paying attention to tonality. And they're going, did that person really mean it? Here's the other thing, and this is a shout out. This is a shout out to, it's one of my favorite authors, Dr. Henry Cloud. And he wrote a book last year in 24, and the title of the book's Trust. The cover's trust, and underneath it is trust upside down. He talks about the 5 pillars of trust. The third pillar of trust kind of ties into what we're saying. The third pillar of trust is track record. If your track record as a leader all of a sudden is you haven't been going down this path, and then all of a sudden you flip the switch.
Yeah.
If you're going to flip the switch, you got to flip the switch and say, you know what? Hey, the past is a past. I can't change the past. I acknowledge it, right? There's a lot I learned over the past 5 years. And I'm deeply sorry for it, but I'm going to tell you something. This is what you can expect from me now. Not only now, but every single day I'm bringing this to the forefront. And if I waver on it, you guys are going to call me out on it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm going to go almost one step further, or just to build on top of what you've just said, because that track record element, that piece of who I've been and how I've acted, is your table stakes. But then on top of it, here's what great leaders do versus everyone else. You will never get trust to be an actual business asset, a resource that you can rely on, if you haven't provided clarity, provided empowerment, and provided engagement. If you haven't been forging that and creating it and driving it, I've seen teams that have great years and the next year they completely fall apart because the market caught up, the market changed, whatever. And that leader never really had clarity, never really tackled empowerment, and certainly didn't engage personally. So that when times got tough, the way Simon Sinek says, the boat starts to rock.
Yeah.
You start seeing the real quality of what's going on inside that ship, and it's not good enough. It's just not. Wow. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Hey, everybody, I tell you, I'm going to tell you this. When Tim Ohai and I get together, there's some deep conversation that happens. There's reflective conversation that happens. But that's why I love Tim Ohai is awesome.
I love you too. And Larry, it's been a joy to have you on the show. I'm going to wrap us up. Is there one final piece of advice you would give to people, especially leaders, to be that authentic, clear, loving leader that they can be or should be?
It's what I believe here at Selling from the Heart. I will preach on this until I can't preach on it anymore. You got to be willing to do the inner work. You got to be able to open up the cupboard to who you are. Opening up the cupboard to who you are as a leader is you got to look at your heart. You got to get your heart right. If you don't get your heart right, a lot of the stuff that Tim and I just spoke about doesn't come to fruition. The inner work that you all are willing to do on yourself will yield you monumental layers of outer success. And that monumental layers of outer success are the relationships of trust you build with your people. But it all starts internally.
Powerful. Powerful and so, so true. Larry, mahalo nui loa. Thank you so much, brother.
Peace.
I hope you enjoyed that interview and got some solid takeaways. Here are 3 that I'd like to highlight. 1, relationships trump transactions. Your competitive edge isn't found in transactional tactics. It's in building deep, authentic relationships. Know your clients, understand your team beyond their roles, and prioritize genuine connection over convenience and efficiency. 2, clarity is your leadership currency. If you're unclear, your leadership breaks down. Communicate with transparency, conviction, and consistency. Engage in robust dialogue, even when it's hard, and use clarity to unlock trust, alignment, and high performance. 3, you can't fake trust. People sense insincerity instantly. Do the inner work required to lead authentically and courageously. Embrace healthy conflict and accountability openly. Authenticity isn't about being nice. It's about intentionally balancing truth and love. In closing, there are 3 things that I would ask of you. First, follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. You'll get even more content that will both challenge and inspire you every week. Second, please share this podcast with at least one other person right now. And third, hit those rating stars on whatever platform you downloaded this podcast. When you do that, it raises the visibility of what we are talking about to people just like you. Holomua, onward and upward.